That's my whole shtick these days, if it could even be considered mine, right? Our whole shtick these days. Just everyone else has to find that out, right? In homage to collective authorship, I wasn't going to speak, right, as me, just do this talk. I was just going to do like a group thing. But then it's like, as I've seen the people come in and speak, and Howard spoke, Richard spoke, Grant's going to speak, and Paul's going to speak, it seemed actually almost contrary to the collective authorship that's being developed here to then, now I'm going to interrupt that by doing my little theater game thing with the group. And that in some ways it's actually more disruptive to the jazz that's being created than to do that. So I will share, but this is, and I promise you this is the last talk you ever have to listen to by me. Okay, you can read my books and do other stuff. It's the last talk you ever have to listen to. And from now on, anyone who's here could just do stuff with me. Okay? So with that caveat, if I have something else to say, I'll correct it, I'll make an announcement. But this form is itself dead. This form, right? This lecture thing, it is not real. Right? It is not real. You know, we are assuming these positions so that we can pretend that I have something to say to you that you need, right? But we're assuming this form and doing that only because we all don't yet have the confidence to just be this or say this or do this, right? So now I'm going to take the role of someone more enlightened than I am, saying things more enlightened than I actually believe and do, so that you guys can then go, yeah, that's the way I have to be. Okay. As I see it, this is a story. We are living in a story. We're living in a world of stories. And while that is frightening to many people, I think it's great news, because it turns out we are writing this story. We are the people writing it, and we are writing it together, whether we know it or not. You know, we've been led to believe, that's the weird, scary sound. But it's not from the shuffling. I think it's an RF sound, isn't it? Okay, if it keeps going, I'll use this one, it's fine. We allow ourselves to believe that the story is either pre-written or that someone else is writing the story for us, because it's much more convenient to believe that than to accept responsibility for the fact that we are the authors of what's going on, that everything that's going on is our direct responsibility. That's frightening, because there's a lot of shitty things going on, and none of us wants to be responsible for that, so I'm not. Human beings can't help but, that's a strong way of saying it. Human beings tend not to be able to help, but to understand their world as narrative, right? We generally can't just take things as they are, but we try to put them into a context or into a story of some kind. And anthropologists and sociologists like to say, well, the reason we create stories about things is because, cavemen was walking around and thunder came, and thunder and lightning was so scary that they said, well, I've got to have a story for how that works, right? So there's the god Yuga, and he made the lightning, and that's why my, wife and child got struck, because I lifted that rock at the wrong time and didn't sacrifice my first this. Yes, but I would say it wasn't the lightning that was so scary that made us turn to stories and narratives. I think it was the moment itself that was so scary. I think it was life itself, not the hardships of life. If anything, someone getting struck by lightning is a little reassuring in a way. Shit happens. Right? It's not that was so scary. It was the moment itself. It was being that was so scary. It was living in time. It was living disconnected from the whole and going, what the fuck is going on here? It's that. I mean, when you figure your truly scariest moments in life, it isn't the moment that the car goes off the road because of the deer and is about to go into the tree. I mean, those are shocking, but that's not the scariest. That's not the great existential. That's not it. That's not the free fall. That's not the K-hole, right? There's another place that's much more frightening. That's what I think the narratives are for. That's what the stories are for. So what happens is, confronted by what is going on here, we come up with a story to explain it. And then we try to convince other people that that story is what's going on here. So when I look at life, when I look at the history of civilization, what I see is a bunch of people saying, oh, this is what's going on, right? And someone else going, yeah, sure, that's what, I'll go with that one. Or people arguing really strongly, this is what's going on, believe it, or I kill you. This is what's going on, and I know NLP, so you believe it, right? Or whatever. I've got great, persuasive capabilities, or charisma. What's charisma but magic, right? I've got charisma, so you'll believe my thing. This is what's going on. So when I look at the world, what I see is a landscape on which stories are competing for dominance. Right? So some of those stories are, you were born into a world where I live in this big castle, and you all work on that land, and you bring it every season, and then I, give you protection. That's the story. You're born into that story. You're a kid, you're a serf, you're a peasant, whatever. All right, you buy that one until the story isn't working or enough people start chattering and saying, let's write a new story, and then they have a revolution, and then someone else gets to be in the castle. Now, stories compete, and this is really why I became, for a while, I guess, my field work is as a media theorist. Stories compete in two ways. They compete with the content of the story, that's the sense of the story, or they compete with the context, the technique, the technology or method through which the story is being told. So the time when I got this was when I was watching the third and in some ways still worst of the Star Wars movies, Return of the Jedi. And there was this moment where Han Solo and Luke Skywalker are taken prisoner and tied up by the little teddy bear creatures, the Ewoks. Right? Remember they let Princess Leia, I don't know, she had tits or whatever it was. They let her sit around. They weren't scared of her, but then they tied up. And R2-D2 and C-3PO end up telling a story to get them released. Do you remember this? C-3PO, the gold translator robot, he speaks Ewok language, and he's telling this wonderful story about Han Solo and Luke Skywalker and how they're the rebels fighting against these evil imperialists, right? And R2-D2 is projecting these holographic images of the Millennium Falcon fighting and going into the Death Star. And all the little Ewoks, you see their eyes going back and forth, woo, never having seen holographic imagery, never having seen a gold godlike, they thought he was a god, this godlike robot, tell the story. And the story works so well. The content of the story and the technology, the magical or mysterious technology through which the story was being told worked so well that they not only released Han Solo and Luke Skywalker, but they fought a war on their behalf in which Ewoks died. Right? They showed them falling into trees and, they died. And what I thought as I watched that scene, this was set me on the path as much as any acid trip. What I thought as I watched that was, what if Darth Vader had gotten down to that moon first and told his story with his pyrotechnics and his holographic imagery? I promise you those Ewoks would have fought for him as surely as they fought for Han Solo. It was the story and the technology that did it. Now, Aristotle understood the content part of stories. And basically, if you ever had to learn Aristotle in school or are sorry you didn't, that's it. That's the whole... That's all you need to know about Aristotle. This is the history of civilization, basically. Right? It's the male orgasm curve theory of storytelling. Right? You create a character the audience likes, That character makes a series of decisions that put him or her into danger. And they bring the audience with them up the inclined plane of tension. Right? So Arnold Schwarzenegger decides he's going to take this stupid, virtual vacation. He's going to go into Mars, and then he's going to keep going and keep going. As he makes a series of decisions, we go up with him because we like him, because he's got muscles or whatever, up the inclined plane of tension into danger, right? So we have the vicarious danger, he has the real danger, until the situation gets so bad that we're going to, run screaming from the theater or throwing the book away, and that's when the storyteller comes up with the solution, right? This is called the crisis, or the crisis before the climax of the story. Now, if we are a captive audience, we will accept whatever solution the storyteller has. Right? If it's Michael J. Fox on Family Ties, it's going to be some family values. Right? He's going to decide to forego his Princeton application interview and run off for Justine Bateman, who's gotten dumped by some guy who's going to college there. Right? If it's Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's going to find the great gun. Right? If it's the Tylenol commercial, right? The person that crashed the car and they lost their job and all this terrible stuff, they're on the rag and they broke their muscles, and it's what are they going to do? It's all so bad. Oh, but extra strength Tylenol, and you take the pill, and it's faster to your bloodstream, and the psychedelic colors come through the body, and then right? And then relaxation, right? This is it is the male orgasm curve here. This is why civilization has worked the way it has, right? Crisis, 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 climax, sleep. I mean, it's not a terrible thing, right? But it's the way it is. It's why we tell bedtime stories to children. The way it's been. The way it's been. And this is while satisfying, this is a manipulative story structure, right? Because we nest the pill right here when the audience has no choice but to take it in order to get out of tension. Right? We bring them up, and then only we, the storyteller, can let them down. And this is the way it worked for a couple thousand years, and while we don't have time today, what I would argue is the vast majority of problems with our civilization come from this shape and the dominance of this shape over other ones. There are other ways to have orgasms. Ask any woman. There are other ways, and ask any guy that's had the other kind, right? I mean, you can actually, that can happen, but that's sex magic, and we're not going to talk about that. Oh, we'll wait. You can do the sex magic thing. I'm just a beginner. This structure, though, is the narrative structure that I think we are addicted to right now. This is the structure of capitalism, right? People will have to suffer, but eventually it's going to be okay, we'll all have money. It's actually the structure of communism, too. We're going to have to fight the fight, but then we'll win, and the proletariat, everything will be fine. It's the structure of Christianity. Right? What happens here? That's when we get divided. The sinners and saints, the goats and the sheep. And what happens when we have this same structure repeated again and again, when we become addicted to this structure, is that whenever we start to experience tension, we want the certainty of relief. We can't tolerate building tension. We can't tolerate the unknown. So as things get edgy, it's like, let's drop the damn bomb. Let's do something. I mean, there are bumper stickers. I'm sure you've seen this. A bumper sticker in Iowa I saw that so upset me. It said, "In case of rapture, this car will be empty." They're looking forward to the apocalypse. I promise you, my car will be filled. That's what I saw on that bumper sticker was, fuck you. I'm saved. You ain't. That's what I saw. And people would rather believe, even poor Oliver Stone, would rather believe that there was a great, serious, controlling cabal responsible for the death of Kennedy than that this fucking shit happened. It's easier to believe that there is a bad guy, a bad God controlling this realm than that there's no one up there at all. It's easier to believe that the story is being written than that we are writing it ourselves. When I get happy, when I get optimistic, the moments in history that I dwell upon and that I'm actively trying to recreate are what to me are the Renaissance moments when people gain access to the tools of storytelling. Now, what Richard was talking about was about the kids in the new generation of mutants is what I call screenagers. In this book, that's actually going to come out again next year, finally called Screenagers instead of Playing the Future, which is what the publisher changed its name to originally, because they thought screenager was too scary a word. But it's about people. It's about those kids who actually see the screen as a portal. But look back way earlier than that, to the invention of text. Right? In the big old days, the days before text, when we were an oral culture, the people who wrote text were basically priests. Right? It's called hieroglyphics for a reason, right? The Hierophant card is what? The priest. Hieroglyphics is priestly writing. There's this great moment in the beginning of the Bible where God's talking to Abraham and he says to him, "Oh, you will be a nation of priests." And Jews today have taken that to mean, oh, we're all going to wear yarmulkes and have robes and be nice priestly people. It's like, no, in context, you'll be a nation of priests means what? You will be a nation of people who can read and write. What God is saying there is, wouldn't it be keen if we had a literate civilization? Why don't you try building a civilization that can actually collectively author your reality instead of what? I mean, God bless the ancient Egyptian civilization and all they had, but the problem with the circular calendrical world that they lived in was shit just happened, period. The reason they had a circular calendar was because there was no way human beings could affect change. Right? One year, it's like, did we pray enough? Did we sacrifice enough babies? I don't know. Did it rain? It either rained and God was happy with you, so that's good. You get some crops, you get fertility, and you get this. Didn't rain this year? Oh, God must be mad. Let's do this. Human beings didn't enter into the equation. Human action didn't enter into the equation because the story was written. Right? A media determinist view of the world would say, which I have, would say the invention of the alphabet, which allowed now, instead of just priests to have literacy, allowed people to just memorize 22 letters and create anything they wanted with it, gave people the ability to write the story. I mean, what did they do? What's the first thing that happens in Exodus? Is they start making their own laws. To talk about what Howard was talking about last night, what Assam was so upset about. People making their own laws? What did they do? They went to the desert before they even get to Jerusalem. They sit there 40 years and they write laws. My God, how boring could that be? They sat and write laws. The first one they do is they give themselves a day off, right? They give themselves Sabbath. And what's Sabbath about? Sabbath is about taking a 1 day a week, a 1/7 rule to go, I'm okay just like I am. Don't need nothing. It's get out of this story. Because if you go more than 6 days at a time in the story, you might forget that it's just a story. It's just a narrative. Construction. Although they didn't use that terminology then, it's not real. And you can forget. So take a day off, read the book, tell some stories about it, share some perspectives on this narrative. What happened, of course, what happened is people forgot that, right? And then they started to take the mythological story and the idea that the story is being written and co-evolved by all of us throughout time ends up being repressed, and the idea that this is the story, this is the testament, this is the way it is, takes over. People really have trouble holding on to the idea that they are writing this story. There are these moments that happen, but then they go away. And I think part of it is the Magick thing, or an aspect of it. It's like, you know that the letters of the alphabet are based on hieroglyphs. The A, the Aleph, was originally, I think it was more upside down, but it was the bull, right? And B, Bayat was house. C was Gimel, was camel. Originally it looked more like that. Water. M was the symbol for water, was Mayim. It still has some of the qualities of the hieroglyph it was based on. And that was just mnemonic devices so you could remember. Because it's like, 22 letters, it was a lot to remember. What is all that? So, okay, Mayim, that's the water one, But then you can make your own words. What's happened since then, we've forgotten that. We forgot what this was based on. Now it's just a symbol that is Why? Because A, B, C, D, E, F, G, because they told us this is right? So now we accept it on faith. And once you accept it on faith, you've given up a certain amount of power now in that. You are no longer as literate as you would be if you understood, and all the what are they called? The Tao, the Chinese who do all the sort of calligraphy thing, because they know, this is the water, this is the tide, this is, because they're one and we're not. So it becomes disconnected, it becomes abstracted, and fragmented. I mean, media theorists like Marshall McLuhan say that the problem with the alphabet was that it was an abstract symbol system. It wasn't an abstract symbol system. It became an abstract symbol system. It was based in real stuff. But then we got disconnected because we lost it. What the Israelites of Egypt got by taking literacy, and what any of us get by taking charge of the story, is life. And that's again what Osama and Michael Jackson were arguing about through Howard last night, was culture of life or a culture of death. This is a culture of death because the story is written. If the story is not yet written, then you can have a culture of life because it's alive. It's still uncertain. The more uncertainty you can tolerate, the more life you get to live. Right? But the less you get this. And that's why the Jews went out into the desert. What'd they do? They go l'chaim, right? Which isn't just this song in Fiddler on the Roof. L'chaim means to life. To say to life in ancient Egypt would have been practically punishable by death. Why? Because this was a death religion. They built the pyramids. It was about death. It was about the afterlife. It's about what happens after, not about what's happening right now. To go to life was naughty, revolutionary, radical. To life, the story's not written. Let's write it, guys. Let's get together and do it. Guys, and eventually girls. Sorry, it took another couple thousand years. It's funny, we could laugh now, but there's a troublesome process by which these Renaissance to-life moments turn into sacred truths. Right? I wrote this book called Nothing Sacred because I was trying to say that what Judaism was about was that make nothing sacred. Because the minute you make it sacred, the minute you set it in stone, the minute you lock it down, it's over. It's death. It's done. You've got to keep it alive, however intolerable that may be. Laws are okay as long as we are writing them. Laws are not okay once they are written, once they are set in stone. Laws are an active process. They're an evolutionary process. They keep going. I mean, why really do the right-wing Christians hate evolution? Because it means that this is no longer a certainty. If we can evolve, we can change. Oops. I mean, we don't just have to get divided into sinners and I mean, gosh, Revelations is not a happy story. Mightn't there be a way out? What would happen if when Jesus came back, we all happened to be nice? Would he bum out? Would Jesus bum out if he came back and we were all getting along? Even then, why not? The reason why kids, the screenagers that Richard's talking about, may have a chance at breaking this, I think, and this is what I've written about, is because of interactivity. The remote control allows kids to deconstruct the content of media. If my dad is watching the Tylenol commercial, right, 1962 or whatever, he's sitting in his lazy boy chair watching the Tylenol commercial, he sees that the programmer is about to put him in an imposed state of tension. Right? They're gonna say, okay, here's the guy at work, and now his boss is gonna fire him, and his wife is gonna crash the car, and his daughter's gonna run away from home. Before he gets up to here, he's gonna have to accumulate, 30 or 40 calories of anxiety, right? Before he gets programmed with whatever he's supposed to do to get out of that story. Or he could walk up to the television set, right? He could take the popcorn off his lap, pull up the lazy boy chair, walk up to the TV, change the channel, and spend 150 calories of effort. And his brain, lazy, right? What's he going to do? He's going to sit in the chair and take his punishment. He's going to take the 15 or 20 and get to here. A kid with a remote control gets out of an imposed state of tension with 0.001 calories of effort. So he's gone. I would argue when kids are changing the channel, it is not because they are bored. Talk to a psychologist. Boredom is a secondary emotion. Boredom comes after anger. They change the channel because they're mad. Oh, you want to program me? Oof, get away. Oof, get away. Get away. Get away. It's a little more like Chauncey, really, in being there, but immediate. So a kid with a remote can deconstruct the content of media. A kid with a Nintendo joystick can demystify the pixel. He can demystify the medium of television. Think back to those early video game days. I mean, those of us who were old enough to be raised in a world without them, we remember the first time we ever played with a video game. I mean, like it was the Kennedy assassination. It's a big moment because we were moving around pixels on the screen. It was this massive, revolutionary moment. This was Walter Cronkite, Dan Rather's turf. And now we can move things around. So the joystick and really the video recorder and the camera gave us now control over the pixel of the medium. And finally, the keyboard and the mouse turned the screen into a portal, right? Turns a monitor into a gateway. And all hell broke loose, right? Because now television, which was authored by William Randolph Hearst, by Rupert Murdoch, by whoever had the money to control this massive infrastructure, now has broadcast nodes throughout it. And that broke up the whole thing. Yes, they tried to undo this, right? They tried to undo the remote control child by saying he had the attention deficit disorder and drugging him to pay better attention, right? They've been working on that one with stickiness and attention economy. Right? You cannot walk anywhere without very highly designed images and text that's designed to pull you and make you afraid and make you stuck on it. That's the one reason it's kind of nice to come to a weird little ashram like this. It's like there's no advertising for a moment, right? Although there's another kind that goes on here that we'll talk about. Yeah, it's that horn thing, playing the horn thing you were talking about, but another kind. They try to remystify the media through things like Windows. Right? For those of you interested in Magick, why do you think you have to install a program on Windows using something called the wizard? Why would they pick the wizard instead of the helper or the guy or the mushroom or the smiley? The wizard is remystifying the interface. This is not for you. This is dangerous place. This is code. Professionals only. This is code. Like that letter M, you don't need to know that was water. You don't need to know. It's an M. Mary. M. You just get that. You just get that. I mean, and how did they undo the participatory nature, the chaotic participatory nature of the internet was by trying this whole .com nonsense, right? By saying content is king, this is about the stuff, right? It was never about content. Content can be sold. It's about contact. It's about people talking to one another, about creating this collective organism. It's about people experimenting with co-authorship. But no, co-authorship is not what Cisco's going to talk about, right? Co-authorship's not what they're going to talk about on CNBC, because co-authorship, no one makes money on that one. We're still stuck in the capitalist paradigm. If you can't make money off it, it doesn't work, right? Solar energy, we're not going to get that in this civilization, because this is a civilization built on money, or at least the one we're living in right now. If it's not a commodity, if you can't buy and sell it, it doesn't work. Permanent solutions don't work. Combat, the roach trap people, they're in trouble. Why? Because it works. They're in trouble. But remember the Pied Piper. When people do something and it works, pay them. Pay them. What did the Pied Piper do? He got rid of the stuff, he got rid of all the rats, and they go, good, they're done, we don't have to pay them. He took their children off a cliff. I believe that we are in a Renaissance period because of these devices. A Renaissance moment as real and as valid as the shift from hieroglyphs to text, and as real and valid as the Renaissance, capital R Renaissance we learned about in school. I mean, think back to what they taught you about the original Renaissance. What did we have? We had perspective painting, which allowed us to see on one plane what normally took 3, right? So 2D now did 3D. It was a trick. What do we have? Well, we have the holograph, which allows us to basically see 4D on 2, or better, virtual reality, which allows us now to walk into 3-dimensional spaces, and we don't really have it yet, but we will. I mean, you were complaining about the 90s taking too long. It's still the 90s. I mean, the 60s didn't happen until the 70s, right? You know, I mean, it's still, decades take 20, 30 years to happen. So it's math, right? I'm good with math. We have those. Each Renaissance shift involves a upscaling in our ability to contend with dimension. The original Renaissance, we circumnavigated the globe, and we got to experience what had been really a 2-dimensional map of our world, now is a 3-dimensional globe. In this Renaissance, we orbit the globe. We get that great picture that Stuart Brand put on the cover of the Whole Earth Review of the Earth from outside the Earth, that great moment of self-consciousness. We also get the atomic bomb. Instead of just being able to circle the Earth, now we have authorship ability. We can blow it up. Right? In the original Renaissance, we had the sonnet, which was the first extended metaphor. It allowed for dimensionality in text. Right? We could relate one thing to another in a piece of text. What do we have now? We have the hyperlink, where we can relate any one thing to anything else. Right? The original Renaissance, well, at the end of it, we got calculus, which is about what? Calculus is about x to x squared to x cubed. It's about relating one dimension to another. What do we get? We get fractals and systems math. What is a fractal but fractional dimensionality? There's a bunch of them. At the end of the Renaissance, they got coffee, where they started to stay up late and talk about things, and it led to God knows what. What did we get? We got acid, which kept us late at night talking about God knows what. But each of these innovations increases our ability to experience dimensionality. Right? We become able to see things not just from a flat place, but from a dimensional place. I would argue that while the first one moved us really from kind of 2D to 3D, the current Renaissance moves us into a holographic or a fractal sensibility, where we start to see each little piece as connected to and part of the whole, right? As self-similar, and as, you know, when you zoom into a fractal and you see that same shape, then you zoom in further and you go, oh, whoa, there's that shape again. You know, the holographic brain that Howard was talking about last night for a moment, when he said, oh, well, the whole brain kind of does it. It's sort of this weird parallel processing thing that we're just sort of contending with. That's what this Renaissance is about. The cool difference between the first Renaissance, the big R Renaissance, and this one, is I would argue the first Renaissance moved us from being passive recipients of the story to being interpreters of the story. Right? We got the printing press in the first Renaissance. So everyone got their own Bible. Everyone can read it and go, oh, I got my own perspective on Jesus now. Right? And they start talking to their priests. Oh, what do you think about this perspective? And the priest, no, we don't like that perspective. It comes from the Pope. Okay, Protestantism, Reformation, change. People had their own interpretation. Right? So people got the tools of interpretation, the tools of deconstruction. In this Renaissance, we go from being interpreters to being potentially authors. Our equivalent of the printing press is the computer, which is not a way to surf the World Wide Web. The computer is this thing with a keyboard that lets us write our blogs and share our opinions and share our perspectives with everybody. So we move from being, in the first Renaissance, from being passive recipients to interpreters. In this Renaissance, we move from being interpreters to being authors. I mean, the easy way to think about that, or to explain it if you want to your mom when you go home, is the experience of a kid playing a video game. Right? When a kid first gets the game, he gets the game out of the box, right? And probably doesn't read the rules. And he plays the game according to basically the rules of the game. He accepts the rules as they were given to him. When he gets to a certain level, finishes the game, or doesn't, what does he do next if he wants to keep playing? He goes online, finds out the cheat codes, right, for invisibility or infinite ammunition. He comes back and plays the game now with cheat codes. Well, is he still playing the game? Yes, he's still playing the game. He's playing it, though, as a cheater. He's playing the meta game. He's playing the game from outside the game. He's playing that game like the kid surfing television is watching television. The kid no longer watching television, but watching the TV, putting the TV through its paces. Yeah?
I was just wondering, to spring
Well, I'm going to go there. The third level, when he gets completely bored with that, is what? He'll go back online, find the more advanced users group, and find out how to hack the game, how to make his own levels, how to become an author of the game. That's what made Doom so successful for so long, is that they gave enough tools so people could create their own WODs. And when people create WODs, are levels of Doom. And when people created their own levels of Doom, they weren't all shoot-'em-up games either. Sure, a lot of kids just made a Doom level of their high school so they could just shoot each other up in that situation. But other kids changed it to be magical systems. Instead of killing people now, you turn them into things or give them abilities or make them able to fly. You can create completely collaborative, cooperative universes using the Doom engine also. And kids started to do that. So kids with video games move through those same three stages, from a passive consumer, really, to an interpreter or a cheater, to finally to being an author. Now, I would argue that's really our relationship to the world, that we are the authors of the world, as MJ would say. We are the world, right? We just are having trouble taking responsibility for that. We're trouble kind of inhabiting that. It's really scary to take that one. What I say, and I'll dub this to you now so you never need to ever be on any spiritual path ever again. If you can accept the notion, just for a moment even, that you really are in charge of the world, that we are in charge of this whole thing, you are enlightened. Period. That we are making this thing, that's all you need. That's it. You are enlightened. All right? We're enlightened beings. Done. It's such a relief, isn't it? Yeah. The problem, though, with the way we understand enlightenment is you don't even exist, is the problem. You know, it's like, I'm enlightened, yeah, but I don't exist. At least not as me, not alone, not just this one guy here. I'm not even here. So it's like, how do you have enlightenment if you don't exist? By reconciling with the notion that evolution, co-authorship, storytelling is a team sport. Right? This is something we do together, and we're all doing it together all the time. The people who know they're doing it, and the people who don't know they're doing it. The dummies, right, who are asleep, all the unenlightened people outside this room who don't know they're writing the story, are writing the story. They are writing the story. It's not a matter of getting control of the story. It's a matter of getting your head around the fact that you are in control of the story. It's a matter of perspective, which is why it's a Renaissance thing more than it is a revolutionary thing. Okay. So see, that's good though. You see, it didn't go down, so no one knows from the outside world that we just got pop enlightenment here. There was a kind of magician that Richard was alluding to that reminds me of the kind of magician I kind of was, and most of the people I knew. And it was the kids who got beaten up in school turned out to be more likely to become magical, right? The neurotic magician, right? Because we were outcast. And the beauty of being an outcast is you have a luxury to observe, right? And you observe and then you see, oh my God, it's so fucked up, right? And you come up with your ways. The problem with that is it tends to make, as you were alluding to, it tends to make magicians lonely people. It tends to reinforce both an inferiority complex and a superiority complex, right? They're stronger than me, they have more money than me, they're more popular, they get more of a certain kind of sex, but I'm actually more cool because I've read this stuff and I know more words and I can do this and I blah, blah, blah. The downside to the original Renaissance, the one in the 1400s, was that it invented the notion of the individual. That's where the individual really came up. Dr. Faustus was one of the first plays about a guy. Not an everyman, but this individual, boom. You know, the Renaissance man is who? Is the guy who can do everything, right? That individual. And this individuality and fragmentation has been going on for the last 2,000 years. As right through the industrial age was about creating the individual cogs. We fragmented until we are each in our own room with our own television and our own cable channel, watching our own thing with our one-to-one marketed product to you, just you. They know, both Bush's campaign and Kerry's campaign knows, based on consumer modeling, which direct mail piece you will respond to. And it is constructed by computer for you. Not that you'll necessarily really respond, but at least they're trying to create 250 million markets of one in America. The possibility for Renaissance 2, the one we're in now, if Renaissances are times when the shadow reemerges, is to get the collective back, right? The two big things we missed out on for the last 2,000 years is women and collective action and any notion of collective, right? We tried at the end of the 20th century to kind of do collectivism, right? So we had fascism. I mean, that was a try, right? They tried to do something all together. Stalin did too with communism. The market's trying to do it too, right? Open market's good, closed market's bad. One big free market, if it's one big marketplace, if the world will just buy the metaphor of the marketplace, then everything will be fine, right? It's another one of those. It's no finally. It's no, I can't say this in public. It's no worse than the one we're apparently fighting against. Really, finally, it's no worse, because it's just as repressive in its own way to a whole bunch and a whole host of stuff. The market is not reality. Whatever a libertarian will tell you, the market is not reality. The market is a great thing. It's a great game. It can be played with. But it is not reality. It is a set of rules. It is a playing field that was set up. The stock market is not reality, right? There's rule. It's a system. It's a chessboard. Preventing us from becoming a collective is that we don't yet know how to come together as a collective of anything but child siblings. Little teams with a coach, right? Little parties with a leader. We don't understand that. Anything together, we start playing together. It's like we use play metaphors whenever we want to come together. It's because we're afraid to do it as adults with stuff. We're afraid to do it as adults who are writing the rules. We're afraid. There's this thing I've been saying in one way or another in each of my books, and it's that there's this terrifying moment in a child's life when it realizes that its parents are not gods. And there's a terrifying moment in a civilization's life when it realizes that its gods are not parents. And I think that's where we are. We've just, this New Age movement thing that we've just hopefully passed through was what? The mommies and daddies of original Christian Western culture didn't work, so we imported a bunch of gurus from the East who either willingly or unwillingly became sex dominators, right? They became new daddies. Daddy, please, let me suck it, And believe me, after one or two women ask, then they don't have to ask after that. So, as I see it, and it's fine, magic is fine, mysticism is fine, as long as we remember that it is remedial help, right? That magic and mysticism are ways to convince ourselves of who we are, what we can do, and that we are in charge. They're ways to, in certain sense, they're ways to make it safe. They're ways to make it feel like some old civilization somewhere actually dealt with this before. Because there's some old language or some old system or some rock or some configuration that this has been mapped. But these really, our mystical systems, our magical systems, and our religious systems are metaphors. And we keep forgetting that they're metaphors. This idea we were talking before, past lives. Right? There's a guy here, he's the biggest one in the world, right? Brian Weiss, who helps people do past life regression. Beautiful idea, beautiful metaphor. But it's not like you had your past lives and she had her past lives and he had his. Oh, that's my past life. In my past life, I was this. In her past life, she was that. Like they give you your own? Like there's a clipboard somewhere that has yours? No, past lives is a safe way to experience the great collective human consciousness while maintaining the fiction of individual identity, while maintaining your envelope. Because it's too scary to go, I don't exist, there's only us. How many past lives do you need to have? How many times do you need to be able to speak Greek or remember where this graveyard was before you realize you aren't you? You're a host of people. The Greek chorus is there. They're all here. You're all possessed. Sorry. The boundary that you use to identify self is in order to disempower you, is in order to create the illusion of your own disempowerment, because the illusion of disempowerment is so much more comfortable than the illusion of the truth of co-authorship. I mean, authorship itself is a metaphor. I'm a writer, right? So what am I going to call it but authorship? Mysticism, right? Great stuff, mysticism. What is mysticism really? Mysticism is a bunch of locks created by people in one period of time so that people in another period of time can take a whole long portion of their lives and pick them. That's what it is. You go through, go through the whole Kabbalah tree. Go through the whole thing. They put it together for us to take apart. Right? And by the time you've taken it all apart and spent the 30 years necessary to do it, oh yeah, that's a valuable thing to do. What else are you going to say? You just spent 30 years. Now, at best, these things were put together in such a way so that the taking them apart, unfolding them, is itself an exercise. It's basically just giving you something to meditate on. It's giving you something, a puzzle. They're just giant Zen cones. There's probably better ones than other ones, but you're going to pick the one you want, whether you pick Zen, whether you pick, Halloween, Friday the 13th, part 7. You're going to pick what it is that you need to meditate on to distract the illusion of individuality so then you can melt out into the other thing. But mysticism, the mystical tradition, we've got to remember that these are made by people. These are maps made by people that then we can learn and decode, and it's a great experience. But religion, what are religions other than war? Religions are testaments. Religions are people establishing that this story is true. Religions are the moment that you take a great mythology like the Old Testament Bible and say, this is not a set of stories. This is not Torah. This is not the never-ending tale. This is a testament. What does testament mean? It means that these were the 600,000 people that were at Mount Sinai that saw God do these things and make a testament, a testimony. What are the Gospels, the New Testament? It's another testimony. We were there, we saw, we moved the rock, he was gone. And then he came back. We swear, we sign. Testament, locked down. It's a true story. Right? Not up for discussion anymore because it happened. All you have to do now is believe. Fall back, right? Go in the water, fall back, believe. Civilization, really, is the process by which old, weaker monkeys convince younger, stronger monkeys not to kill them. And they keep that going until the younger monkey is old enough to understand it and thus too weak to let it go. Right? By the time you understand this, you are one of the old, weak monkeys, depending on civilization to keep those young ones from killing you. So it's not a terrible thing because it allows for longevity, right? It allows for generational projects to happen over longer periods of time, but it ain't real. Likewise, drugs, psychedelics, God bless them. But drugs are called drugs for a reason, right? Drugs are medicine. They are medicine. They are corrective. Right? A full-on enlightened, awakened Buddhist guy really can't take drugs. Why? Because it means I want to change now from this state to that state. Right? Now I am not high. I will take the drug, then I will be high. What kind of duality crap is that? Yes, it's a great way to visit. It's a vacation of a sort, an active vacation. right? But there's a separation there in order to do it. It's another space. It's a great thing. It's a drug, and it's no less valid a path than mysticism or past life regression or anything else. But the things you see, as we were just saying, the things you see are inside your own head. The things you see are of your own making. You are not going to another universe. It's here. It's now. It's a way of seeing now. Right? You don't go anywhere. There is no here and there. It's all here. There is no us and them. It's all us. That's what I was trying to work through with Howard a little bit last night. Asamo is us. Asamo is me. Timothy Leary said, and I talked about this in the Disinfo thing, find the others. It was his big thing. Because he did a lecture in Berkeley way back when, in the 60s, and some guy had taken acid. He's like, I had acid, and I had the great experience, and I saw the whole thing. Now what do I do? And Tim said, find the others. And by that he meant find the other people who've had that experience. What I would say now is find the others. Find the ones find George Bush, find Jerry Falwell, find them, understand their fear, which is just as great, maybe even greater than our fear. Magic is locks made by you. Right? Just as mysticism is undoing the locks and picking the locks made by great people from before, magic is making locks yourself, making combinations, taking the words and putting them together, making your own letter M. Right? You make your own thing. Why? It's to appropriate a symbol system. Because we are living in, we can call it magic, but most of it's being done unconsciously. We are living in a symbol system that feels as if it's not of our creation. So by doing a magic ritual, we create a symbol system that is of our creation, so we can go, oh, I get it. It's like if you have a headache, you can concentrate on making the pain, make the pain, so you can see yourself as the source of it, and then let it go. That's what we're doing. That's what disinformation really means. We're fooling ourselves. We're going, oh, I can put this thing together. I can make this image. I can make this logo. It builds your courage. It builds up in you what you need to look truth in the eye. To be in the moment that we wrote all these stories to avoid. That's all we're trying to do. Jazz ourselves up, as you would say. Jazz yourself up not to do anything special. Jazz yourself up to be alive. Jazz yourself up to be present. Jazz yourself to be in the moment and to embrace the joy and the horror, the utter horror of existence. Scary stuff. What are we so scared of? Finally, this is the saddest part of it all. Each other. We're scared of the other ones. Desperately, desperately afraid of each other because we're afraid that someone else's story is going to contradict our story. And if it does, then we have to fight to the death for it. And we don't. That's why what we're doing now is learning how to collaborate on the story, to go, oh, I get it. It's not either or. It's not his story or my story. There's one thing going on here. That's why past life regression is so funny to me, because it's like, oh, that one life and that one time. No, it all happens. It's all happening now. All of it. All time and all space is all unfolding in the moment right now with everybody. And there's currently, in this illusion of time, what is it, 6.5, 7 billion sets of eyes looking at it. This creature looking at itself. And it's not that we're going to do something to make that happen. That's why Desjardins was really close, that we evolve. It's not that we evolve into a creature of 7 billion eyes and 14 billion, hands or whatever. We are a creature of 7 billion eyes and 14 billion hands, and we just are adult enough to go there. So I'm for anything. I'm for everything. Do whatever you want to get there, to have the courage to do it, but realize that none of those things, it sounds kind of Krishnamurti-ish today, that none of those things are real in themselves. They are all wonderful tricks, medicines, and remedies for the fear that creates the illusion of individuality and isolation. They are ways to relieve your own pain and suffering long enough to break out of self and start being alive, right? Actually doing life. My only, and then we'll talk, my only additional caveat to that is I think just as in life, you get a series of opportunities to kind of do the right thing, and you usually don't, and then you bum out about it, and then it comes back again, but when it comes back harder. And it's like, are you going to do it this time? Are you going to finally do the right thing? No, I can't quite, now I love it. Then it comes back again, and it's like, it's not a winning game, because yeah, you get stronger in the interim, but then the challenge is that much harder. And if you had just taken it last time, it would have been okay. I would argue that the Osama challenge is just such a challenge. If we do believe that life wins, if we do believe we are in a creative culture and that creativity wins, then we really do have to do it this time. This is a scary one. I mean, Howard's right. There's nukes and subs and big stuff, right? If we don't take it this time, right, we do it the nasty way. We spray the raid, or get the antibiotic, or use the bulldozers, or use our nuke, do whatever it is. You know what I mean? The coward's way out of my child has an ear infection, it might be real, so I'm going to give it the tetracycline, right? We know that makes the antibiotic stronger for the next round, right? But this time, maybe it'll be someone else's child that gets the super bacteria, right? If we deal with the crisis that way, I think it's just going to be worse next time. What I argue for all the time is that we have a window of opportunity, and that's what's so great about these Renaissance moments. Renaissance moments are windows of opportunity to flip the whole damn thing, to flip civilization into the next level of complexity. We might not be ready. There might be too much fear. There might be too much addiction to this story structure. Or we might not make it. But I can't help but be a catalyst and one who is pushing for us to grow up and do it. One, because it would be totally cool to see that happen in my lifetime. And two, because I think the stakes get higher as we grow up. I don't think we're kids anymore. I think we are adults. I think we're playing with adult toys, and we need to behave. We need to behave as the people we are, which is, like I've been saying, the people writing the story. You know, because now, boy, we've got more than pens, you know, to be writing it with. We've actually got some serious abilities. Okay, let's talk with each other. Are there thoughts, questions, concerns? Okay, let's talk with each other. Are there thoughts, questions, concerns, discontinuities, novelty, suggestions, hopes?
This new narrative, won't it have to make room for completely opposing narratives? I mean, if we're always open, can we imagine a context in which completely contradictory stories, in which completely contradictory plot twists can come about, can be manifested or created by different authors, you know, different aspects of maybe the super author, which is everyone, you know?
Yeah,
at the same time,
for sure. I mean, he's asking if there can be contradictory stories. Yeah, as long as it's not just one story going on in the same linear way. As long as you can do parallel processing, you can have a multiplicity of things happening at once, a whole different kinds of experiences. I did this collaborative novel online called Exit Strategy, which is about a lot of these issues. And it was like I was trying to figure out how can I do a collaborative writing experiment online. If you just let people write the story, then one person can kill your protagonist and then they're gone, right? And then no one else. It's like if you did collaborative Star Trek, what would happen? Someone would kill Spock and someone else would bring him back and someone else would kill him. And you can't, right? So what I did was instead sort of wrote this book to start and put it there and then said, okay, now we're all anthropologists from 200 years in the future analyzing this text. So now we're all going to write commentary to it. which is sort of what the Jews figured out back when. The way to write laws as an evolving truth is to create this thing called Talmud, which is this series of comment on comment on comment. It requires dimensional thinking, though. It requires a dimensional relationship to truth, where you have these, reframing and reframing and reframing. But it can be done.
Do you think it's possible to get, I don't know, a group of 12, 20, or more, maybe even the whole planet eventually together? Right?
Well, we're doing it. We are. I mean, that's the thing.
But getting everyone to be conscious about it, and getting everyone to actually make an effort to get along and actually try to come up with, I don't know, one story. I try to stay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to do it is through new rituals, if you will, that give people practice in collaborative authorship, so they can start to see how that works. I mean, team sports were a great training ground for people to learn how to fight wars against other tribes and stuff. I mean, that was a good one, right? But and now we moved, as the culture of the individual took over, we moved into extreme sports, which are all about the individual. Now extreme sports is going to move into, I think, something else. Not synchronized swimming. That's 20th century. But something else. I mean, rave was a great attempt. I mean, yes, it was silly and this and that, but those were all just ways of putting safety on something that was actually really scary, which is I'm going to disappear and be part of this throbbing thing. And see, and it kind of worked. It worked better than Nuremberg, as far as I'm concerned, at approximating the state we're in. The problem with the collaborative narrative, the one I haven't quite solved yet, is how do you bring people in whose narrative is that this is not a collective narrative? In other words, how do you bring people... This is the thing. I wrote this book on Judaism, explaining what Judaism is and how it works, and I promise you this is really what they meant when they were putting it together, and the great philosophers, the Maimonides and the Spinozas and the Hillels, all said the same thing. It's nothing new what I'm saying. They all said it, and all got excommunicated in their times for saying it. It turns out that and I went to, 50 or 100 synagogues, Judaism is the worst place to try to teach Judaism. It's the worst place to try to teach that because they've got it locked down now as this other thing. It was really discouraging.
Do you really believe, from reading the texts, that at the time that Judaism was founded, did they really have this idea of collective authorship in mind? Or did they really believe in the stories and the mythologies that they were creating?
Oh.
Did they have the same literal interpretation of
No, they didn't. They didn't have the same literal interpretation. They understood that the sons of Jacob, Benjamin, Joseph, Judah, that these were almost satires of the different tribes that came together in the desert to go conquer Canaan. But they understood that these were characters. It was almost to be like if we wrote this story now where it's almost like Animal Farm, where you've got this one to represent that. Now we'd have someone represent China, and then this guy would represent Africa, and that it was they got that at least for 300-400 years. They got that.
When would you place the switch?
Oh, it's hard. It's hard. Different people at different times.
Who was fighting for the side of the people who were interpreters? Who was fighting?
We are the weirdos. The weirdos. We are usually the people fighting for the side that this isn't the story are the people who are the underculture, the people who are being repressed. And that's what sucks about it. Because usually if people don't have the need themselves for the change, they're not going to ask for it. The hippie movement, the 60s, was different. That's why everyone, people criticize it for this, but the cool thing was, it was rich kids. It was kids who didn't need it who were asking for it. That's actually what makes it, to my mind, more advanced than just people who are starving saying, feed us. Yeah.
I noticed that you kept mentioning fear. Like, you always hear that in the media, like the left is constantly accusing the right of using fear of terrorism and whatnot, and the left should be scared that the right is manipulating us into this and that. But the information, for the most part right now, is available. Like that whole mixed burn society, like we have access to code, we have access to information. Imperfect information is being solved minute by minute with updates and blogs and everything that you were mentioning. So what makes you focus on fear as the primary emotion that's stopping us from going forward? I mean, what would make you think that we're scared rather than just I don't know, indifferent or bored or people just are disengaged, like, why would you assume that they're scared?
I don't believe that apathy and boredom and the sort of almost delta wave trance of so much of America is a primary state. I think it's a resultant state. I think it's the first 500 times you see a child starving on television, you have a reaction to it. The next 5,000 times, you have less and less of one. And finally, you can just joke at Sally Struthers instead of the child with the flies on its head. I think it's because you desensitize, not because desensitization is a natural state, but because you've been unable to act. You've been unable to see yourself as an actor in it.
What do you see as the cause of that impediment? Like, what is making you feel as though you are unable to act? Like,
I think it goes back to it, and that's why "Man in the Mirror" is an interesting song. I think because it does start in the moment with the person. If a person can't do it, can't act in a moment-to-moment way as a human being through the moments of their personal life, it's really hard to see oneself doing that on a planetary or some kind of cosmic level. So I really do put certain kinds of, unless we have personality disorders, I put certain kind of neurosis. I would blame that for it. I guess it's a slightly Freudian psychoanalytic view of it. But I do think that there's sort of a personal, even revulsion, I don't see as being primary as, but revulsion, you could use the word revulsion instead of fear. But I mean, on a certain level, I don't even see fear as real, right? I certainly don't see evil as real. I've never seen evil as real. I mean, I see I'll use physics. Heat is a force. Heat is an energy. Cold is not. Cold is not real. Cold is just the absence of heat. So fear is the absence of love. Hate is the absence of love. It's places where love has impediments, where it's blocked. So instead you get that cold, right? So you get that cold, which first you experience as fear, and then after a while you experience it as, you get cool. You get cool yourself, so then you just experience it as numb or as apathy. There's even a certain strength through apathy, though. It's what I used to write about back in the Gen X days, that just disengaging from the political system is a way of saying their thing is not real and, we can do something else. It's just, it doesn't generally engender activity. It tends to engender a different kind of passivity and an isolation. But when the reason I would say fear, and I think the reason why I would use that term, I don't think we're just dominated by it, was partly because of the sort of spiritual context of what we're doing and mysticism and why people are looking, and magic has a lot to do with the underbelly and being able to deal with it and being able to accept one's own power. But I don't think the reason why people are not accepting their own power is because they're apathetic. I think even an apathetic person, you say, here, do you want a zillion mega rays of power over the collective story? They would, oh, sure, yeah, that'll be less boring. I think it's because they don't know quite what they do with it. But I think it's a different culture to some extent. I think that, and I would argue the people in this room are not afraid of it in that way. But when you look at a world of people that really believe the kinds of stuff they believe, it becomes hard for a person as optimistic as me to think it's anything but willful. And if it's willful, which it is, will, it's will. We're all willing it, right? This is all will. Then why are they willing that? Because they're scared to will something else.
See, the only way that I kind of interpreted, the reason came full circle in what you said was fear, I pretty much understand as an apprehension of uncertainty, like something that you don't know, natural correlation to that is fear, because you aren't aware of the next step. And so you said that what people can't tolerate for the most part is uncertainty, and that's why I thought maybe you would use
Right.
the correlation there. But then you brought up the increase of availability of information and people's ability to interact with the technology and all the media and everything that's around them, you now have the ability not only to ingest it, but to alter it. So then you're effectively, by being given that power to interact with your information, you're actually decreasing the level of uncertainty.
Absolutely. But the first Time magazine cover story on the internet was child porn. It was a picture of a baby looking in this computer and about to be contaminated with this stuff. You know, the first thing my mom heard of computers was viruses. Right? By the time my dad was hearing about computers, it was .com. Right? So it was a completely other thing. So, yeah, I mean, why did everyone go into the tide pool of AOL before they went onto the real internet? Because they were scared. You know, what is this thing called technophobia? Right? The people are afraid of technology. I don't think they're afraid of technology. I think they're afraid of what they can do with technology. I think people are afraid of who they'll be. You know, people are afraid of people, just look at the article, look back at the things that were written about chat rooms. Someone can pretend they're a girl who's actually a guy. So, you know, someone's going to cyber rape your daughter. Okay, my daughter can be on the subway and get raped, or on the computer and get cyber raped. You know, cyber raped in such a way that the FBI can actually track back to the IP and get the guy. You know, so no, the fear is, I mean, what I used to say in my first 3 book tours, when they would say, "What are you doing?" I would say, "My purpose is to reduce the level of fear people have of the changes that are happening." That's what Playing the Future was. I was saying, you know, Beavis and Butthead are not teaching your children how to make fires. Beavis and Butthead are teaching them how to deconstruct the content of MTV so that they see that these things are commercials and not art. MTV was the most upset about that because people stopped watching videos. It ended up changing they had made more money in the end anyway, but it ended up having to change their business model. But I was saying, yeah, Beavis and Butthead teach. So these things that look scary, Pee Wee Herman was great media satire. But there was so much fear of him that, I mean, my God, the guy jerked off. You know, and know how afraid parents were of Beavis and Butthead and South Park and Teletubbies? What are Teletubbies? I mean, my God, they were afraid of them. You know, and that's because these are all either metaphors or realities for people beginning to start to play, for people realizing that reality is plastic and that we are in charge. I mean, gosh, the books on dealing with computer stuff, look at the titles, Data Smog, and, you know, what's interesting, there was like all these super optimistic books, of which mine was one but not. Because the really super optimistic books, like the Negropontes out there and those people who wrote super optimistic cyber books, all had the story about our digital liberation, you know, told in this. You know, it's funny, it's like third wave thinking uses second wave metaphors, you know, or there were these negative ones about how we're all going to die and we're all going to, you know, or we're all going to not die, but masturbate ourselves to death through cyber porn, or, you know, not know who to believe. I remember the New York Times did a piece about how it was so funny because it was wrong on both levels. It was beautiful. How people are going to go out on the internet, and they had a doctor and a scientist. People are going to go out on the internet, find alternative cures for colds by using things like pond scum, like blue-green algae, what they're talking about, or echinacea. In other words, what they were saying was, do you realize people are going to go out on the internet, and instead of treating, you know, their depression with this, they're going to go get a root from the dirt. So it was like both things were wrong. One, they're going out on the internet and getting better information, or getting information at all, because, you know, doctors didn't used to give you any information about what anything was. And second, that they're getting good information. You know, they're actually getting the greedy engines of creation kind of stuff. But again, and this is why I can't be a conspiracy theorist. I can't say the guy at the top of the glass building who owns the New York Times wants to keep us from getting L-tryptophan. You know, so they're going to make it illegal. The guy at the top of this building doesn't want us to know about the internet, or doesn't want us to know about Magick, so he's going to put in his magazine. No, I look at it as much more systemic than that. We appoint these magazines to be our parents. We appoint our president to be our parent and our pope and our priest and our everybody. We appoint them to be the arbiters, to be the filters. We are the ones energizing their story creation. It is not that they are in charge. It is not, this is the funny thing, it is not, nor has it ever really been, a top-down media space. We have been collaborating all along. We have. We have. It's hard because it makes you feel a little bit like, and it's a little unfair to make us, to punish us. It's not like the child blaming him or herself for daddy's molestation. It's not that. There were stages of civilization where we basically couldn't do anything but be bent over and spanked, right? Because we were babies. It's all we knew. So now that we are developing our voice, now that we want to take charge, we're seeing, oh, look, the media space is changing so that now we can make our voices heard. We can develop collaborative methodologies. It all is happening according to plan, and it is all completely spontaneous and unplanned. It's all working out just fine. It's just if we can reduce, and I would hate to have made people more fearful than less, I think if we can reduce whatever the forces are causing us to hesitate. And I've believed it's fear that keeps us from crossing that chasm. But there might be other things, just loving what it's like to be a little baby. Oh, I'm a baby, I like role-playing baby. Or if you always want to be, if you're big into, bondage and domination, you'll always like being the bonded one. So you kind of fetishize that. Then yeah, it is time to get over our fetishization of being pure bottoms, and learn how to participate actively as well. Yeah, so in a weird way, maybe it might be more fun to talk about it not as fear, but as a certain kind of pleasure. Right? We get a certain kind of pleasure by thinking that we're alone. We get a certain kind of pleasure in thinking we're discreet. We get a certain kind of pleasure in thinking that I'm not you. Right? Because you get selectivity. You get there's a whole Buddhist path on that that's supposed to break judgments of all kinds. You've got to go roll around in shit and all that. Forgot what that one's called. It's awful. But you break distinctions then. You break your distinctions. So yeah. Maybe it's for me. And from the way I've seen the world, it's the obstacle seems to be this fear of taking, fear of actually being. Of being as powerful as we are, and fear of one another. But just as much, it's because we get off on that. We've become, we're certainly addicted to this. You give a monkey a switch with an orgasm thing attached to its brain, it will push that switch until it dies. Right? Not because it's afraid of putting the switch down. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Sorry to be contentious about things you said.
Contend.
Well, the thing you said about the kids who were flipping the channel, it's similar in a way to the imagery that we have in a lot of movies now, like Moulin Rouge or or music videos or whatever, which are sort of like tilt, like flash in your face, always switching the image like movies. And I wonder if it is good in the sense that it almost seems to me to be like a substitute for like creating something where you're trying to give form every instant to every instant of thought you have and like give it a shape. And so people who are in these industries are understand very well that to keep somebody like on it, you always have to surprise. It's not about ADD, but it's about substituting the creative impulse with the idea of creation. So you change the channel and you think that you're creating something. So I don't really, I don't know if you think of it, you don't think of it like that.
Well, you're talking about two different things. It's one thing to be on a mountain bike, going nuts on a hill, It's another thing to be strapped into a roller coaster and thrown around by someone else. I mean, one you're experiencing agency, and the other you're experiencing someone else's. You're being flung around. The creation of content, which in a sense you are doing with a remote control, is akin to the creation of content by a DJ. On the one hand, DJs are just surrogate consumers, right? You're listening to their record collection and they're not making any music. On the other hand, a great DJ is actually moving textures around. And on the other hand, as Grant or I or any writer would say, we're not writing, we're just spitting up textures from other things before. It's all cut and paste. I mean, there's not an original thing going on.
I would say that I would agree with the idea of adding things into video games and changing the actual content. But right, I mean, it's the difference. It seems to me with television, especially, like it is that you're on a roller coaster, and it isn't that you're on a mountain bike. And that's the issue.
Sure, television and mainstream media, basically, capitalism depends on a certain amount of passivity and programmability. So capitalism will imitate and sometimes even supersede the forms of a generative culture. It will. That's why I'm here arguing for people to experience themselves as authors. Because once you do, you know the difference. You really do.
Kind of like what you were saying about the kid who's playing the video game, then he plays a wider meta game, goes on the computer, gets the cheat codes, whatever. Television isn't something that we can just look at on its own, and channel surfing on its own. Maybe television, you watch television, but then you go out and you buy magazines with the people you've seen on television, and you read up about them, so the next time you see them on TV, you can make wisecracks with your friends as you're flipping through the channels. It becomes a wider game, not just flipping through channels, it becomes commentary upon life.
It can. I mean, the problem is, believe me, brand managers understand that. And brand managers understand that the Apple Store in downtown New York is now more important on a spiritual level to people of our ilk than the church or the synagogue. And they are building it in that way with the Genius Bar and the things on the altars and the giant white. I mean, brands provide meaning systems for people.
There's beautiful subversive stuff on television. Most of it is in kids programming. I mean, you found that out with Ren and Stimpy and and all that. I'm sure there's stuff on TV today. I haven't taken the time to analyze it, but like SpongeBob SquarePants, like.
There is. There's definitely great. There's not as much, but there's definitely you could spend your television evenings watching TV that's not just that is designed to help you wake up. You can. It's just if it's going to last, it has to be TV that also serves the function, usually putting people to sleep too. Watch The Simpsons. There's 2 shows in every Simpsons. There's a narrative episode where Homer either gets fired or doesn't get fired. The thing happens. And there's also this other thing, this media satire, these moments of connection. So you watch every scene as a satire of some other piece in media so that you get to experience, you get to practice pattern recognition, which is really what you're doing. Oh, this is Hitchcock. Oh, this is the Bounty commercial. Oh, this is that. So you've got to work on 2 levels. It's the way Spinoza wrote. It's the way Maimonides wrote. Because it's the way Disinfo works. That's why it's called disinformation. It's the way to get it out. It's you do it on 2 levels. You do it on 2 levels at once. It's why you can write a comic book that 10 million kids will buy. It's like, oh, it's just a comic book. And that's, to a point, yes, but I'm like, enough. I'm like, no, here I am. This is it. Fuck it. This is a mainstream concept, buddy. I'm sick and tired of being in the counterculture. I refuse. I'm not in the counterculture. George Bush is the counterculture. I am the culture. Right? So no, I won't anymore. I'm not going to shroud my memes. Anything about memes too? I was thinking, I'm so over memes. Fuck memes. Look, memes. Look at the word. Me. Make me. It's the genetic urge, right? The reptile brain. Procreate. It's the first rule in the Bible. Be fruitful and multiply. That's why the Hasidics have, 93 children each. Me, 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 me. Whether it's my idea, I want to propagate my idea, or I want to propagate, my genes, or ideally both. Or propagate my ideas through my genes. It's Osama style, right? As opposed to Michael Jackson style, which is, man in the mirror style. But yeah, I'm so over that. Yeah.
You were saying earlier that the market or the sort of market-driven economy creates meaning, and brands are intimately tied into what meaning they provide for the consumers. But that meaning becomes interchangeable because the brands need to go on, different products need to be introduced. And so doesn't that actually create a vacuum of meaning that people are constantly...
It does. It does. But the cool thing about it is, in the best of situations, and as long as you get the capitalism like God is just an idea, right? As long as you get that, you can play in the meaning system. In other words, Apple is not Steve Jobs. Apple is a conversation between Steve Jobs and us, right? The apple was what in the Bible? Apple is literacy. Do you dare take it? Do you dare write the laws? God made this law? No. I'm going to eat the apple. I'll write the laws, buddy. Right? That's why he called it Apple. This is literacy. You're going to know the code. You're going to write the laws. You're going to be in charge. Take it. He begins that conversation. Then we all do this part. Then he goes 1984. Then we do this thing. People start personalizing it, right? That's the big thing. Started with personalization of your computer and anthropomorphization of your device. And now people are going, that actually is disempowering to some on a certain level. And now, and how did Steve Jobs react to that? Now he's got iLife and these things where you sort of have an online thing. You can go to any web page and get your mail, and it's all iSynced. So now your sort of Apple personality is a virtual being that moves around in different places, and it's on servers. It's interesting. But great brands can make it a conversation. Where I get worried is if people don't think of it as a plastic meaning system, but think of it as meaning itself. Yeah.
If we talk about the story narrative, is that essentially it's made up, right? You're sitting around and you don't see maybe meaning or existentialism, and so we made up this story narrative. Is what you're suggesting then that you switch it around, you can make different types of story narratives that you personally make. But if you do that, is that meaningless too? The story narrative is a lie. If you make your own story narrative, is it just...
All right. I'll go with Jeremy Bentham and utilitarianism on this. This storyline is very effective for single-pointed control of the masses. There are other branched, parallel, and collaborative story structures that I think will be more conducive to less pain and suffering. Yeah, they're all provisional. None of them are real. None of them are real unless you start, they're no more real than your experience. There is reality here, right? I think a lot of reality is open source, is still up for programming. A lot more of our world is software than we realize, but there's also hardware. I think there is some stuff, or at least it's well enough, it's a good enough illusion. I'm going to go with it, until the end of it. It's like good enough. This is that. There's a certain, that part. But it goes back. It really goes back to Michael Jackson. There are people dying, and all that. This one isn't working for the people dying. This one works for something else. This works for one-pointed control. This works for postponement of joy. That's what this is about, postponement. It'll happen in the afterlife. It'll happen then, not now. And what I'm arguing for is narrative structures that come now, which is why it's not revolution. Revolution is then. We fight and then we win. Renaissance is now. It's the unfolding. It's happening at this moment. We have won. The counterculture is won. We are the culture. It's done. In other words, now it's just a matter of manifesting. So when you pull it out of this time thing and postponement, it just enough of this one. Enough of this one. At least if we become conscious of this one, we can use it, but we use it, willfully rather than just submitting to this thing. But yeah, the other ones are arbitrary. But I do think we can find models, narrative models, that more accurately reflect our experience of this reality, and narrative models that more equitably distribute the necessary life sustenance materials.
That was going to be my second part about manipulation of the market and of brands and all that. That it seems that manipulation is only open, that interaction, I should say, is only open to X percentage of the population, which is the green money tickets and can participate in that whole game. And so what about the part of the population that isn't, and where do they exist on these sort of narrative layers you're describing?
Well, this is a good, and we got to stop too because it's just a minute to noon. A two-part answer. One is, I was consulting to Lego for a while about Lego Mindstorms, and it was partly inspired by writings that I had done about how kids should be able to program their own toys and make their own things, and what you should do rather than giving kids toys is give kids the tools to make toys. That's what Mindstorms is. Mindstorms takes Lego and goes even further in the real Lego direction rather than the Bionicles prefab Lego home, thing. Lego Mindstorms failed. And in testing, what they really found out finally is only 15 to 20% of kids want to make their own toys. 80 to 85% of kids, just like 80 to 85% of adults, really don't want to engineer reality. They just don't. They're really, and kids, these are little kids, so it's not like they're afraid, right? They haven't been taught to be afraid yet. They're just not particularly interested. Maybe they were, but it seems that they might not be. To the other way, and that's a big fear of mine, and that's why I'm concentrating a lot on younger people's stuff and thinking about, is that a natural state, and is Plato right that there's the golds and the silvers and the bronzes, and basically there are these masses who are just going to be manipulated and just let them mope around, or is there just a trigger that's not being flipped when they're 1 year old that would turn them all into living people rather than, Dawn of the Dead mall people? The second is, yes, currently we live in a culture where there is that, 5 or 10% that has their hands on what's the dashboard, what seems like the dashboard of a hell of a lot of power. So what I'm doing is I'm writing a business book. I'm writing a book for them that basically says this, in a way. So I'm the only way I can, and this is why I'm using Magick, because I'm very afraid to do it. I'm very afraid to do it for so many reasons. One, because the people who are already my readers are going to think I've sold out. Two, because I'm going to be in this business world and they're going to start offering me all this money to do evil things. There's all this stuff. So, Magick to the rescue. What am I using Magick for? To protect myself. So I can contextualize this book as a sigil through which I will penetrate the business world and remember that it is not real and da-da-da. It's all that, and have my little safety line. I always imagine a literal safety line back out to climb back out of this thing if they get me or something. But yeah, you gotta. But that's the thing. Embrace the other. Embrace the people who. We all know the reason we don't have solar power is because we don't have a business model that can support it. We're in a commodities-based, economy in a lot of ways. At least the energy economy is. And powers that be won't let us use the powers that be, right? Because where does Alan Greenspan get involved in that? Where does the currency happen? It's the combat problem. If you solved cancer, if you solved energy, the people with the guns lose their power. Yeah, but we can, is the thing. We may have already. It's just a matter of the internet. We'll see. It's possible. It's on a website somewhere, just not getting the proper publicity from the GE-sponsored NBC. But we'll find it for you at Disinfo and bring it to you. 1995. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Have a good lunch.